to imagine for a moment that you're living in a little Italian village in the 16th century. Not a horrible thing to imagine, right? If that was you, your heroes are likely to be a wily, anarchic, mischievous servant, a slow but lovable stable boy, and maybe even a hunchback poet. These are the masks of the Commedia dell'arte, a tradition of European theatre from the 16th century that, together with the Greeks, is still evident as the roots of most of our modern-day theatre. The actors wearing these masks would roll into the village square on their cart on which they built a little theatre, and they would start to perform skits and improvisations satirizing the upper classes and creating a lot of excitement and maybe even revolutionary thought in their audiences. Okay, what does this have to do with rehabilitating inmates, I hear you ask? Well, actually, at the Actors Gang, everything. When I was still living in the land of fish and chips and rain, I was working with, among other people, the English Shakespeare Company and the London Shakespeare Workout, both of whom have prison programs. And I'll never forget the first time that I walked into a maximum security prison with just a copy of Julius Caesar in my sweaty palm for protection. And then a few hours later, all my doubts and cynicism was washed away by the sincerity and the excitement of the inmates to reveal their creativity, often for the very first time. That fed my budding realization that the arts could be about so much more than just entertainment. So when I moved to the land of sunshine, Los Angeles, and saw the provocative and socially conscious work of the Actors Gang Theatre Company, I joined the company right away. And I went to our artistic director, Tim Robbins, and asked him if I could be part of the prison program that I assumed they had. He told me that they didn't have one, but I was more than welcome to create one for the company. So I started doing some research. Now, America can be very proud of itself for being #1 in the world for a lot of things, but you might not be so proud of this statistic. America is the world's leading jailer. The US currently has 670 prisoners per 100,000 citizens. How does that compare to other countries? Well, as you can see, it's 7 to 10 times as high as other countries. If you see on this chart here, there's a big spike after 1980. In 1980, the US only had 150 prisoners per 100,000 citizens. So what's to blame for the huge increase? Probably a lot of you know. The war on drugs. Half of Americans incarcerated in prison right now are there for drug convictions, with 80% there for possession. In 2007, around $74 billion American dollars was spent on what they term corrections. If the recent incarceration rates remain the same, 1 in 15 of you will spend some time in prison. If you happen to be born a man of color, 1 in 10 of you will spend time behind bars. As you can imagine, I had a rude awakening. Maybe some of you right now have just had a rude awakening too. But I lived in a household where we were encouraged that if we saw a problem, to try to find a solution. And I had a sneaking suspicion that the approach we had at the Actors Gang might just help. We work in 4 heightened states of emotions. Happy, I love this picture, angry, sad, and afraid. And we use Commedia dell'arte masks and white makeup to create masks. And what that does is it helps the inmates to start on a level playing field and to enable them to free themselves from the view they've previously held of themselves. In a punitive, as opposed to rehabilitative, prison system, anybody who's been behind bars for more than a few months is likely to be severely affected by the isolation, the extreme and abnormal human relations, and certainly by the living conditions. If you add that to the fact that human beings get institutionalized very easy, and if they don't have the opportunity to have rehabilitation programs, the chances of life, a successful, valuable life on the outside, are slim to zero. And then if you add to that the chance that people who are in prison have very likely not had good examples of valuable, happy relationships. And so your new parolee is basically a ticking time bomb. In our 8-week sessions, we give the inmates an opportunity through our exercises to be able to transform their emotional lives and start to be able to recognize the emotions that they're feeling, and through developing empathy, start to recognize the emotions that other people might be experiencing. They also, for very often, the first time, start to create deep, abiding friendships with people of other races. And in prison, you probably know that the racial barriers are extremely high. The wardens and the officers in prisons often tell us that the guys who do our classes no longer struggle with violent infractions, and they've learned how to curb their tendencies. And the inmates themselves tell us that their relationships with their families and friends outside of prison have also improved. So how does this happen? Well, let me tell you about one of our inmates called Keith. I'll call him Keith, that might not be his real name. He's been down for about 24 years for doing something I'm sure absolutely terrible. We don't allow them to tell us what they've done so that we're not sitting in judgment while we're teaching them. And Keith came in with a pretty hard shell. We have them write journals for 8 weeks, so I'll let Keith tell you in his own words. Week 1. This is kind of a weird class. I don't like it, and it's uncomfortable, but I never finish what I start, so I'm going to try to keep going. It's a challenge, and I can see the teachers have a heart, so for that reason alone, I'll try to commit to the class 1 week at a time. Week 3. Things are getting a little better. I've never enjoyed being in front of an audience, but I do like the unity of the people in class. If someone had told me I'd be putting on makeup in prison, I would have laughed at them. I hope it comes off easy. Week 6. I really don't feel like coming to the class today, but it's time I stopped taking the path of least resistance. Part of the reason I started taking the class is because I know that if I can finish, it's the first step toward becoming a more responsible and productive person. Week 8. We're about to do the final performance. I can't believe I stuck with it. Despite having to wear makeup in front of a bunch of men in prison, openly displaying emotions I've not dealt with in years, I actually feel human again. I look at inmates and staff differently. I see camaraderie taking the place of hatred and hostility. In California, in the past couple of years, our state has been forced to comply with federal law to stop overcrowding in prison. It's called realignment. Last year, the government had to parole 40,000 inmates, mostly with no rehabilitation, into our communities. This year, the feds are trying to get him to parole 10,000 more, although he's resisting. 5 years ago, due to budget cuts and the recession, all arts and corrections programs in California were discontinued. The 1 or 2 that continued, like ours, did it without any public funds and really through blood, sweat, and tears. The Actors Gang, our company, are in the business of making the invisible visible. So you then have the opportunity to decide if you want our society to continue in this way. I don't know about you, but I'd like to know that when someone goes to prison, they come out better than they went in, not worse. And I can assume that none of us want to live in a state where in the last 30 years, we've built 3 universities and 21 prisons. Yeah. In my opinion, the arts create an opening. I'm going to leave that there. That deserves to be seen a bit more. Art creates an opening, an opportunity to glimpse eternity, and it works. In the words of our guys, the Actors Gang has made me feel human again. It's brought me to a creative state that I've not experienced since I was young. Here, we can look at it here. It's given me the ability to let go and just be human. An affirmation of healing, forgiveness, and rebirth. I've discovered how to laugh fully, to cry and feel. While showing these emotions once more, I can laugh at myself and attain enjoyment from this. I've learned how theater is as much inner work as it is outer work. I've spent over 19 years up to now guarding my emotions and further losing touch with humanity. The Actors Gang has helped me rediscover myself and empathize with others. This program has helped me express emotions that for a long time have been dormant. The only emotion I was able to express extremely well was anger. Now I'm able to express happiness, fear, and sadness, emotions that are seldom shown by men, especially in this environment. I'm probably a little different than most actors in that my dream come true isn't about generally winning an Oscar or starring in a movie with Johnny Depp, although trust me, if either of those things happen, I'll be completely fine with it. My dream come true actually happened this week in prison. Probably not a sentence you hear too often. I went with some other members of my theatre company to watch some of our guys perform in a talent show on the Sensitive Needs Yard. And I was really shocked to see some of the guys who I've never met before, who've never been in our class, appear to start to be using elements of our style of work. Afterwards, Chris, who's one of our long-term students, came up to me and told me that they formed a theatre company. And for the last 3 months, they've been doing classes every week, based exactly on the classes that we teach them. He's brought 20 new guys who've never been in our class before and has trained them to the level that they were at when we last left there. They've written a commedia dell'arte play called The Magnanimous Ass, which I cannot wait to see in August. And also, Chris told me that he himself has made 25 commedia masks from glue and paper and the suede from the inside of their prison issue boots. So why is this my dream come true? Well, I know that in order to teach, they must have really transformed something about their lives, to really have dealt with their egos in order to be able to teach others. And in order to create an ensemble, I know from my own bitter experience, you have to start to develop conflict resolution skills. You have to start to take responsibility for yourself and to listen to others. These are all fantastic things for them, tools that they can use when they come out of prison. In our 7 years of work in the Actors Gang Prison Project, I've seen transformative change. I've seen the emotional truth in our workshop start to really change and transform the depths of people's lives. I've seen men turn from cynics to dreamers and to embrace compassion as a fundamental part of their personality. I've seen men with no hope turn to leaders who inspire and motivate and mentor others. Arts is not leisure time. When we have these programs in prison, they're not just for fun, it's not leisure time. They can create a fundamental change in people's lives. And until we change our laws, get better education for our children, and are able to raise up the struggling communities around us, we're going to need to have programs like this that address the needs of people to rehabilitate themselves before they come out into society. And remembering that human beings aren't just a brain, but also have emotions, we're going to need to continue to find effective, and by the way, cost-effective, ways to harness and support that part of the inmates' lives. Simply put, we have to decide what kind of neighbors we want. Do we want people coming out who have unaddressed, extremely bad drug problems, behavioral issues, less than a high school education, no idea of technology, no good way to create valuable relationships? Or do we want guys who've taken responsibility, transformed their lives, overcome their drug problems, and learned how to harness and make creative their emotional life? The arts can do that. We have to find a way to raise up the arts and support it financially and emotionally so that we don't have the problems, continue to have the problems that we have now. We know they work. From what we hear, we're not allowed to track the guys, but from what we hear, our guys in the last 7 years have had 0 recidivism. 0. That's against a California statistic of 65.1% currently. as you can see from this picture, in the 8th week, the guys culminate, and they receive a certificate. And written on the certificate is this quote: "A great human revolution in just a single individual will help achieve a change in the destiny of a nation, and further, can even enable a change in the destiny of all humankind." Thank you.